way too loud. So, I'm going to just restart this right now. This is my second installment of the Hear Me Out series. It's a series where I talk about underrated and alternate ways to play armies. I feel like for a while now we've been stuck in this sort of meta building of lists where no one really tries anything outside the box, thinking that it can't work. Even though I see it succeed routinely, and I've been succeeding with outside the box lists. Kruleboyz is probably one of the most intensely this cases. There's really only one sub-faction that sees any play whatsoever. 100% of tournament entries for GTs in the past, at least since this last battle scroll, have been the same sub-faction. Almost everything is built the same way. It's just monster killers and Garippa spam, getting strikes last, and it's pretty decently okay good, but it's not like great. It's just like solidly okay. And it's the only way to play them, and it's not very engaging for either player. It's a pretty underwhelming thing. But I think there's a lot of potential in Kruleboyz to do things outside of that box that are as genuinely competitive, if not more competitive. I just saw some stats that, at least over the past month, Kruleboyz win rate has declined all the way down to a 33%. So at bare minimum, you're not doing any worse than that with these lists, like bare minimum. So if you're playing the standard build, people figure out how to play against it, other things cut up to it, its points got hit a bunch of times, you're not going to really succeed with it. So you might as well try something different, bare minimum. But I also think that these lists are genuinely quite interesting. One of them is a little bit of a meme, but it's still be really fun. I don't really expect people to play that particular one. It's just kind of funny. I had prepared 5 lists, really 4. There's that meme list, but it's just kind of a joke. 4 that I put a good amount of thought and work into. They may not be perfectly optimized for every individual person's play style, and they probably would need some reps. But I also developed some strategies for them. I will have thoughts on how you can make them work in different ways you have to go about the game to really pull the most out of these different sub-factions. So I'm going to be talking about all of them in depth, in order. And I submitted some stuff. I was on Moss Dog's channel. If you don't know Moss Dog, check him out. I'll link him in the YouTube videos as well. His community is great for greenskins in general, and really all destruction armies. And just really nice people. He makes great videos, and the community is really like engaging. They all talk to each other, so I highly recommend checking him out. But I got some recommendations on what people wanted to see and wanted to learn how to play, or wanted a good build for in Kruleboyz from them and some other places as well. So I'm going to be talking over these, and hopefully you guys like these lists and try them out. All right. So, first up, murkvast menagerie. We're starting with the Army of Renown. This is one of those armies of renown that I think is, I'm just shocked that no one plays it. I look at it, I read the rules of it, I'm like, this is incredibly good. Why does no one bring it? I just haven't been playing Kruleboyz, otherwise I would have been bringing this for a while now. I think it's actually genuinely viable, just straight up, like it doesn't even really require too much craziness, because the rules in it are quite strong. So firstly, you get a 3-inch move once per movement phase, your movement phase only, of one of your monsters. It can move into combat. If it's already in combat, it must end that move in combat. It gives you kind of a little bit restricted, but it's some extra mobility, and mobility is king in the game. Being able to get where you need to be is really important. This is really good on any monster for various reasons. It's a very flexible rule. It's just a genuinely good rule, right? There's a little bit of a mini Mighty Destroyers aspect to it. You might see like, oh, it can't be like in the hero phase, it's only during your movement phase, there's only so much pinning you can really do with it. However, what it can really do is prevent people from redeploying away from you or counter shooting, because you can tag units that weren't previously tagged and really set yourself up for some nice aggression that's much more consistent. So that's one of the things that I'm seeing about that, is it lets you be more consistent in your aggression. That's an important thing to be able to do. Consistency and movement are the best ways to win games of Warhammer. The second rule here, subtract 1 for hit rolls for combat attacks that target friendly murkvast menagerie units while they're wholly within 12 of a friendly murkvast menagerie monster that has not charged this turn. Now, I just assumed when I first looked at this, and I was incorrect, that it only affects infantry. That is not the case. This gives -1 to hit to monsters as well that haven't charged. Also, it doesn't say a different friendly murkvast menagerie monster. Units are wholly within 12 of themselves. So all of your monsters always have -1 to hit if they didn't charge in combat, not from shooting. All of your other units that haven't charged have -1 to be hit when not shooting if they haven't charged. That's huge. Your entire army basically has -1 to hit a lot of the time when you're not. And when you're charging, you're hitting them first most of the time, so you're like, you don't really care as much. So this really creates a giant combat math advantage for you, and units that don't normally have this ability. It really shines with certain units, and other ones less so, which we'll get into in a moment. Actually, let me talk about it right now first before I move on to this. It doesn't shine with gut rippers. They already can get -1 to hit. They're already paying a lot for just being a raw stat soak. You really want to be leveraging with almost any other unit in the book. Everything but gut rippers and like your shooting units don't care. So you probably don't want to play shooting units in gut rippers. That's what this is telling me right after that. Proper Grizzly, this is pretty nice. It is just a raw damage extra rampage, and really interestingly, some of your units' rampages either are narrow or they don't have one. Like, for example, the Trog, the Mire Brute, does not have a rampage. I initially assumed that his self-damaging bonus attacks ability was a rampage. It is not. So they can use this ability and their self-harm to get bonus attacks. That's a really nice little combination there. But also some of your units like the Vulture, it's like if it's not charging, this is great. It's good on like Gobsprak, etc. There's a lot of utility here, and it's just extra damage. And that's just good, They also have some really powerful command traits and artifacts. So Grim Diet gives one of your monsters, or one of your heroes, doesn't have to be a monster, but it should be a monster, 5+ ward. That's real strong. That's super good. Especially on like a Mire Brute Trigoth, but it's also really good in different ways on like a Vulture boss, or really any of them. Having a ward 5+ in the Mire Brute means it's really tanky, so it's brawling, taking damage, and it's healing, and it's more likely to survive in combat. Stuff like the Vulture with this, it kind of runs around the table. It's just not, you can't pick it off. It's really, really, really hard to kill if you don't like commit to it. So you could easily put this on a Vulture just as well. It's pretty good on any of them. It's just generically powerful. Skin Wriggler Larvae is not as good, but I think it really shines on a Vulture boss because you can basically pick an objective during your hero phase, and for the rest of the battle, enemy units have -3 control score and ignore positive modifiers on their control scores. So it becomes really hard to take things back from your monsters and from units in general once you've put Skin Wriggler Larvae on them. So any objective you're going to be like contesting, or they can't really super focus and kill you off of, it'll really help you score a little higher there. Lastly, this spell really shown to me. You pick an infantry unit and give them a ward 5+. That's really good. So you have the ward 5+ on one of your monsters, and then you give one of your infantry units unlimited. So you could run multiple. In my list, I didn't put multiple. You could run multiple casters and give multiple units unlimited. Like genuinely, you could run this as a pretty heavily infantry-oriented army and give multiple units 5+ and then -1 to hit, and like it's pretty good. It honestly might even be in some ways better at playing the standard build that people have been seeing of like gut ripper spam. But these are all pretty good abilities, right? So here's the list. There's a lot of wiggle room on doing, you don't have to do exactly this, but I'm going to talk about some of the ideas of what I'm going for here, right? So you have to run Scumdrag. And notice that I did not bring Soggy Scumdrag. This is classic Scumdrag. Soggy Scumdrag doesn't do anything in this. Soggy Scumdrag helps you with dirty tricks. You don't have dirty tricks in murkvast menagerie. What Swamp Boss Scumdrag does is he basically picks a target, he gets bonuses to wound, and one unit of Hobgrass Lilies, which is the reinforced one here, gets crit mortals against them, and they can do a surprising amount of damage. So you can, they get crit mortals and they get +1 to wound against that target. So it's a pretty nice little damage bomb for very, very cheap. And when you put in like -1 to hit or 5+ ward, they actually survive, which is kind of interesting. So they can really, really, really overperform for their points with crit mortals +1 to wound, 5 up ward, -1 to be hit, while absorbing time, letting your monsters do what they want. There is 2 Mire Brute Trogoths. One is Grim Diet, Grim Diet's fantastic on Trogoth. You could also put this on really any monster and it's good. Um, 20 Gut Rippas, 1 unit of Monster Killers, and a reinforced unit of boltboyz. So you have a decent number of infantry models here. You've got 20 Gut Rippas, 20 Hobgrots, a unit of Monster Killers, and a reinforced unit of bolts. So there's like a decent amount of flex there. There's a Swamp Caller Shaman. So he and, well, really just him. He's the only one who he can cast that spell, give me 5 wards, and he can also get +1 to save on units. So you can really get a unit quite tanky to absorb space in this list and really fight above its weight. These Garbas can get -1 to 2, -2 to hit. Alternatively, you could run a bunch of units of Monster Killers, which is probably slightly better here, but this is still good. Like, there's a lot of flex you can have here. It's more talking about the concepts of what's possible. If you notice, the Corpse of Volcha has Skin Wriggler larvae, and that lets him basically steal objectives really, really, really well, and then hold those objectives, and then you can just like toe onto them later in the game with various things and steal them right back, even when they have like a good amount of units, because like 5 control versus -3 to control, unless they have at least 8 models on the objective, you're just taking it back, right? And it affects every unit on that objective, so it makes it really easy to snatch that right back from people. There's also a Snatch-a-Boss on Sledge-Raker Beast. He basically can buff a unit, and in this case, he's probably most of the time buffing the boltboyz, and give them a little poison, and when they shoot units, you can poison them, and on a badge D3, they take that many mortals, and get -1 to wound until your next hero phase. Or actually, until the end of that turn, till the next turn, basically. So, at the end of your turn, you do it. Oh, definitely, dude. I'll add you right after this. No problem. Thanks for joining, by the way. Yeah, so you can join this. You basically shoot them, give some mortals, and then give them -1 to wound during their turn. A lot of your guys are already at -1 to hit. You got 5 up wards. You're getting really, really, really tanky at that point. Like, -1 to hit, -1... with the Garbas, -2 to hit, -1 to wound, 5 up ward, +1 to save, without even all defensing. They're not doing anything. Like, they're just bouncing off of you. And you don't necessarily have good damage buffs for these guys, but monsters hit pretty hard. So you're surviving hits better than a Kruleboyz normally does, and you're having a little bit of this objective control and a little extra movement when you need it to get these like break-up bosses in the right positions, get Scumdrek and your Snatch-Up boss in position. The Hobgrots are overperforming for their points because they've gotten numerous buffs, and you can also put these defensive buffs on them. And while you may not think that Hobgrots will be tanky, at -1 to hit, -1 to wound, 5 up ward, crit mortals, +1 to wound, and then you all attack them, they're actually doing a lot. Like, it's surprising, like, how much damage they can pump out here. So, this is really a fairly balanced list that's designed to basically take a fair approach to the game and win a better math game against your opponents than a lot of Kruleboyz lists traditionally have. As with I always do with all these lists, reading it doesn't necessarily always grok for everybody. So I'm going to show you a picture of what the list looks like on the table. As you can see, it's a decently body-heavy list. It's not like crazy spread all over the place, but there's a lot of threats. There's a lot of flexibility here. It's really like a balanced mid-range type list where you're going to be basically playing a fair game against your opponent in a positional battle. You're shooting, you're fighting in melee, you got some movement tricks, you got some shenanigans without really leaning really too hard in any one direction, and you can take this in a lot of directions from here. My big point I want to make is that murkvast Menagerie is a very fighty list that is very flexible, and you can do it in a million different ways, but like, it's underrated as hell, and people should start playing murkvast. If you're tired of just spamming like 40 Garipas and a bunch of monster killers, you can do this. You don't have to run Garipas. I don't even think they're necessarily the best here. You can just run nothing but monsters and run an auxiliary list if you wanted to, and they're all giving each other -1 to hit when they're not charging and be hit. And they're like fighting pretty strongly. The one thing I wish that it did have access to was Gobsprak. Gobsprak would be super good in here, but you can't bring it because he would have the cast to be able to throw out those 5 up wards while also being a monster, so he benefits from all the special rules in here, but alas, he's not allowed in this. So that's one thing I think is truly missing, but I think people can really succeed with this list. solved it. So, that's list number 1. Now we're going to go on to list number 2. These are going to get more and more interesting and intricate as we go. So we're going to Badmouthin and baiterz. This is one of the soggy sub-factions that, generally speaking, people didn't rate particularly highly. I do think it has some downsides, but I myself think it also has a lot of potential. Badmouthin and baiterz is a very high skill cap style of playing Kruleboyz. You can do a lot with it, but it's not forgiving. It's not going to carry you on its shoulders. So my goal here is to explain more or less how to make this sub-faction shine. So, this is the core rule. I think their name is very fortunate. Okay, maybe some of us like baiting. I'm personally a master at it. The core thing they do here is that basically get a different dirty trick than everyone else has, where they can pick a unit that's visible, and until the start of your next turn, each time that you use the move ability, any move ability, so redeploys and stuff like that count, that does not end closer to the insult hurler, the person who put it on them, than it was at the start of the move, they take D6 mortals. So that's wildly swingy. And, you know, the first instinct you would think is like, well, if I just put it on them, they're going to just walk at me, so it doesn't do anything. And what you really have to think about is, really in the name, baiterz. You are trying to bait people and put them in uncomfortable positions where basically they either chase your useless, stupid stuff they don't want to go after, or they're going to take a bunch of damage over and over again. Several abilities also have the move keywords, so they can take like 3d6 in a turn, or more in a battle round potentially. It's not super likely, but they probably 2d6 is not unlikely if they don't keep moving closer. So you can kind of pin and maneuver and set yourself up in places where they're going to take extra damage. The other, actually, it is very similar to the Slash Mirror, but in my opinion, significantly better. Slash Mirror just doesn't work, and it gives them a buff at the same time. So the downsides of this is, one, kind of hard to get into positioning for it. You have to be in like a really inconvenient spot, and number 2, chip mortals don't really do much on their own. Like if you do D6 mortals to somebody, it's not particularly useful. If you do it once, do it 3 times, it's pretty good. Do D6, D3, 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 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2, D6. Then it starts to become brutal. Like when you start taking more and more of these chip mortals on your army, that's when it becomes a problem. So, we need to lean into that, right? There's a lot of rules that support that. So, and the other thing is it's a dirty trick. So there's a dice roll involved in it, and your other dirty tricks get worse. So, you also don't want to be leaning into a build that relies heavily on your dirty tricks working. So the classic build right now really, really, really wants to do strikes last and 5+ mortals on big units of infantry. We're not playing that way because we need to be using our dirty tricks to put cruel mockery onto people. So we're already going to be less likely to succeed on our rolls for it, and we're still going to have access to them, but like we don't want to be relying on it, right? So you don't want to build into a build that's like, I have to get strikes last or I'm in a bad position. You want to be in this position where you're like, I'll do some like movement teleport ones. I'll do some little shenanigans here and there. Occasionally I'll try to get strikes last. If I get it, cool. If I don't, it's all right. I'm not super relying on it, right? So that's the goals for building this list. Firstly, I put Soggy Scumdreck because he helps you do better with dirty tricks. If you start failing dirty tricks, he makes you more likely to succeed on other ones, right? And so he kind of takes away some of the downside of it being a dirty trick because he can help you more likely get dirty tricks later when you need them. And when things are starting to go south or when you really need something to go off, he makes it more likely to happen. So he's really nice for that. It's just a kind of an obvious choice to help this list flow. Here's some other interesting things. This is rules from the Soggy Dog. So the dog basically can pull heroes out of combat and move them to annoying positions and like assassinate their hero, and then he's in a pretty good position to do Badmouthin and baiterz because he'll be like behind their army, and you're like, I don't want to chase this dog down, but he's like directly behind me, and he's coming from battlefield edges and doing it. He's dragging them out of combat and doing it. He's constantly like being irritating while being pretty tanky. So that's a really nice synergy there for positioning and for kind of like assassinating small units, because we're talking about some of that chip damage, and when he's pulling that infantry hero out and probably killing them, that it's like taking damage in many ways in many small pieces that without really getting to strike back, right? Sneaky on is right in the same sort of category. You can normal move or retreat during the enemy move phase. So, enemy hero phase, sorry. Basically, it lets you be in just annoying positions. You're moving all over the place. And you're really, really hard to catch. And if they do catch you, you can get out. So that's pretty irritating. Here's some extra sources of chip damage that we can add into this combination. So, Hobgrats. If any of them live, on a 3+, they deal mortal damage and can retreat without taking any damage. And it's not limited to once per turn army, so you can do this on multiple units of Hobgrats at the same time. So you go bang, 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 and they're retreating out of combat, and now they're in position to do Badmouthin baiterz. Now they're not stuck with you, they're being wherever they want to, so they're swarming all over the table, very hard to catch, very irritating. And if people don't focus on them, and they leave even one model alive, it just becomes this pain in their ass where you're just doing, oh, take d6 mortals unless you chase down my one stupid little goblin sitting in the back of the table. Festering Wounds, which is the one from the, what's it called? The Snatcher Boss. This one, it's not a huge amount of damage, but it adds up. And you're doing the D3 mortals, and if you put on several units, because like it's basically if you can send a unit into multiple combats at the same time and spread some damage out, and then do D3 on each of them, pretty annoying. And then they get debuffs as well, but the debuff is less relevant here because most units are pretty squishy in this list, but it's still good. Lastly, Gobsprax's ability, which normally is kind of dog shit. But in this particular context, I think it really, really shines. Because you're doing all these chip mortals all over the place. And you're doing this movement annoying game where you're kind of positioning all over the place. And his ability to unbind, to move fast, to cast irritating spells, and to do chip damage is really, really important. Because a lot of times what people will do to try and prevent you from being annoying with lists like this is they'll like teleport around with teleportation spells. They'll give 3-6 charges. They'll like cast like healing spells, stuff like that. And you're like, nah, and you're taking chip damage. So it becomes, when you're taking Badmouthin baiterz, this, boom, 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 and all these units are moving quickly and repeatedly and moving during the opponent's turn, it becomes very hard to catch them and you're taking damage the whole time. Lastly, Shine Stealers. This, I think, is the secret tech that makes this list work. Shine Stealers is one of the best regiments of renown in the game. These fuckers are so annoying. The chariots can retreat from combat during the opponent's movement phase. They have like really irritating abilities. Didn't save it, so I didn't make a slide. I had all their abilities lined up, but I guess I didn't save the slide. There's multiple units of dogs. There's like a small hero, chariot, and 3 different units of dogs. So they're running all over the place. And the whole idea of this list is you're basically just covering the table. They get a deep strike. They're really hard to catch. They're redeploying. They're moving in combat. You guys are moving at the end of their combat. You're moving during their hero phase. You're teleporting. You're throwing down the swamp. You're throwing down the foot of Gork and stomping them so they have -1 of d6 charges. And they're taking damage the whole time. And it becomes like a nightmare, and you're just scoring because you have so many units on this table. So here is the list. It's a lot of random janky stuff. So it can be, it's one of those lists you look at, you're like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. It's too much text. But I gave some context here. That Scourge of Garen Killaboss with Slippery Scumbag. He can basically retreat for free with Slippery Scumbag in a really annoying way. But so can the Killaboss with Sneaky on. So basically there's 2 different ways to get out of combat. The Slippery Scumbag, by the way, what it does is at the beginning of combat you can roll a dice. And if you succeed on the dice roll, you can leave. So he's in the back of the board attacking heroes, pulling out of combat with their buddies. And then when they come after him, he just leaves combat. And so if they do go after him, they're doing nothing, most likely. And if they don't, they're taking d6 mortals over and over again. You have 6 boltboyz, 3 and 3, so you're doing this chip damage with shooting across the board. Just, it's not really there to like one-shot things. It's adding up a bunch of sources of damage, and they do a really good job of holding various buffs on them, so they're really nice. You've got 2 units of monster killers. Those can easily be swapped out for other things if you don't like monster killers. and the Shine Steelers. And I'm going to show you what the list looks like on the table, because it gives a better idea of what you're working with. There is a lot of small units, as you can see. Most of them are quite fast. A lot of them can be swapped out. Those 2 units of Monster Killers, I personally would play 3 units of Hoggrots. Depends on how people want to do it. I try to put this one's like a more safe approach, but if you put 3 units of Hoggrots, you're really, really leaning into this strategy, and it's the same points, and it fits perfectly. The Monster Killers do fight a little bit better, so it's kind of like you kind of need some combat units, but it's up to you how you want to play that. There's a good amount of magic dominance. Your 4 casts, and you have the Gorkrora, so you can get +2 to cast. So you're pretty freaking consistent on your casting. You're +3 to casting on your shaman. So you're casting your magic really reliably. You're slamming out that swamp. You can countercast that swamp at +3 to cast, -1. So you have +2 to cast during your countercast to say no running at 18 inches range with 6-inch aura. So you're like, people will have run in charge, like, nope, not catching me anyway. And you're just running around the table being a complete piece of shit. And it seems really fun to me. Like, to me, this is like the sort of stuff that everyone wishes that Kruleboyz played like. Just being sneaky and obnoxious and being like, gotcha, bitch, and jumping on the back of their neck. Like, it feels more Kruleboyzy to me. But very hard to play. I would say that anyone who wants to play this list, you should get a couple reps in first and see how you like it. It's gonna be like weird, because you're not really picking fights, except for on vulnerable units, and you're running around the table, and most units are just basically trying to not be in combat, except for with very small targets and wherever it's like useful. You're stealing objectives and scoring up the wazoo because you have really good battle tactics. So that's Badmouthin baiterz. Next, we're going into the exact opposite of that, trophy finga. This one I think is very competitively viable. It's one of the ones I'm really shocked people don't play, because it's just raw potency. Like, it's not even complex. Like, it's straightforward and just good. And I don't really see why this one doesn't see play. This is what trophy finga does. So it gives companions crit 2 hits. There's some really good companions in Kruleboyz, and I understand that part of why people don't like this sub-faction is because some of them have crit mortals already, so it doesn't do anything. But there's ones that don't, and those ones are very good with this. Very good with this. There's one in particular that comes to mind, and anybody who plays Kruleboyz knows exactly which one that is. It's the Menagerie. If you don't know what Menagerie does, he has 4 attacks based on the mount, and then he can do D3 damage to himself, and for each point of damage he takes from that, he gets +2 attacks that combat phase. So he can get up to 10 attacks on his mount, all damage 3, at rend 2. Give those some crit mortals is pretty freaking strong, right? So obviously you want to play him. This is his average damage table, unbuffed. I'm going to just roll this down a little bit, just to get kind of a sense. So this is like what they do if you don't do all attack, no buffs of any kind, just a basic Trog. It's pretty solid damage. It's not like insane damage, but it's pretty solid. They are hitting on 4s, so like it's not as consistent, right? With the simple addition of playing it in trophy finga, the damage definitely jumps up. It's especially on like things that aren't just like 2+ saves. Like, you're really seeing a pretty substantial spike of average damages across the board from just that one sub-faction without having to do anything. But there's also other things you can do to lean into this. But I'm already pretty happy to if I'm find like a 4-up save and doing like 14 damage on average with the medium roll in the mortals and just average dice without doing all attack, without doing any other buffs, just that. That's pretty fucking good. That's going to pick up a lot of models. And they're pretty tanky, and they're 200 points apiece, and they regenerate constantly. So that's pretty good, right? So obviously we're going to play at least one Menagerie Trogoth. Why not 3? I'm thinking 3. Because, like, 3 is, like, in the reasonable range where you could actually, like, collect that, or at least borrow it from friends. 3 is, I have 3. You know, you get a couple 3D prints, borrow them, whatever. Maybe you buy 3. Like, owning 3 is not a crazy ask, I think, if you really like them. So we're going to put 3 in this list. To take maximum advantage of this. But there's also another unit that's really, really good with Trophy Finger, and that is the Killaboss on Nashtooth. And I'm not talking about the soggy one. I'm talking about the classic one. And here's why. That's ours it gets. I just assumed only worked on infantry. But it doesn't. It doesn't affect the companion attacks. But it does affect the riders, and the riders do hit pretty hard. And also, the dog benefits from the crit 2 hits. And the dog already hits pretty hard. Like, it's a pretty fighty unit. It's not going to, like, blow an entire defensive squad off the table or anything like that. But it's definitely going to outfight most small things. It's only 150 points. Pretty much anything in its points range, it'll probably outfight it. As is. Additionally, giving +1 to hit, when you have the crit 2 hits on these things, you're starting to really get like a nice amount of bonus damage without having to spend any resources to do it. Like, you're just existing and playing the game as you want without having to cast any spells, do any prayers, spend any command points. This is just bonuses on bonuses. So you're starting to really, really, really hit hard. When you're talking about the damage output from the crit 2 hits, and then you add +1 to hit for the riders, which have 5 attacks damage too, so it goes hitting on 3s instead, that's pretty substantial, right? Additionally, adding 3 to the control score, pretty nice. Just useful. Doesn't say it has to be infantry or anything like that, so you can add to your monsters, etc. You also have Minun to add 1 to hit for companion weapons, so one of your Trogs can hit very, very hard without having spending resources. You have +1 to hit on the rider, +1 to hit on the mount, exploding 6s. The rider has crit mortals, so like you can really start outperforming in damage output in this without really having to do much. And that's the key thing to keep hammering. You don't have to spend resources to get these buffs. They're just there. These units are already fine on their own. You're not spending spells. You're not doing anything. They're just good. And that's really important because it becomes really efficient. This is the list. This is a list. There's many ways you could do it. But I'm going to show you the list and I'm going to show you some tactics about it that are pretty cool. So there's 3 Meyerbeard Troggoths. And there's 2 Killabosses on Great Nashtooths. Importantly, I'm going to scroll back just a little bit. That's ours he gets. Adding 1 to hit for combat profile. Not once per turn army. No limitations like that. So you can create multiple auras of that. And that's pretty strong. So the Garippas are at +1 hit as well. You got a Merc now because it's a 6-up ward aura, which also affects monsters. It's not limited. So these Breaker bosses are becoming quite tanky. So are the Killer bosses on Nashtooths. They're pretty freaking tanky. There's 2 and monster killers because they're just good. I figure most people have 2 monster killers. This is, by the way, like, those are all flex spots. Same with the 3 Slittas. You can run 3 Slittas or you can run other units. Like, there's a lot of flexibility here, but I'm kind of talking about, like, a general way to think about it. There's also a Sloggoth. So the Sloggoth also has companion weapons, and they're damage 2, and he's got 6 attacks with those. So, like, these are all, like, units that are kind of upgrading in damage output compared to what you'd expect. And the Garippas and such like that, and all these infantry units are running and charging with the Sloggoth, so you can get some pretty good explosive aggression out of this list. You have a lot of just combat math on the table. It's at 1970 right now, and I would not be super surprised to see some of these points drop. Like the Nashtooth, maybe the Breaker bosses might go down 10, etc. You might see some cool flexibility you can add into this list. There's also some interesting tricks you can do here. So if you take a look at this Meyerbrute up here in this corner, who has Egomaniac, Tough-Un, and Eyebiter Ash, this is another way to play it. So Tough-Un could be Minun for extra damage, but I think this is a really interesting bit of tech that I haven't really seen people been using that I think is quite strong. So Egomaniac basically gives him a 4-up pass-off ward to infantry in his combat range. So he can basically become very tanky that way, passing off wards, and importantly, these Breaker bosses do have regeneration, so he's healing, he's a decent save, 4-up ward, becomes quite tanky. Tough-Un puts him at -1 rend against him, so it's kind of very similar to +1 to save, not quite, but pretty close. And then Eyebiter Ash is once per game. He can give, basically, in his combat range, he can give -1 to hit, -1 to wound. So the idea is that this Breaker boss and some of these Hobgrass Slittas go up the center. And they like take the center of the table, and they're very, very tanky and very hard to deal with, unless people really commit on them. And you kind of set them up like this. So if you bubble wrap this Meyerbrute, if people come into combat with him, if they target him, He's passing off mortals into these hobgrots. Passing off on a 4-up every one he takes. He's going to be a -1 to be rended. He may have strikes first, who knows, depending on if you dirty tricks or whatever. He's hitting like an absolute truck. And on top of that, if you're a significant threat that's actually going to probably kill him, he'll give you -1 to hit and -1 to wound that turn. So he's damn near impossible to kill, and you can send multiple units of hobgrots up there with him. And if you bubble wrap him with 2 units of hobgrots up in the center of the table, it's only 160 points. So basically, if they don't attack the hobgrots, they're not killing him. But if they're attacking the hobgrots, they're in his combat range, and he's killing them. He's hitting stupid hard. Like, if you haven't fought against a Mire Brute, they do crazy damage, right? So you put them in this position where, like, they kind of don't have a lot of good options. And that's where I'm running the Monster Killas and the Slittas rather than, like, larger units, is because you can bubble wrap your Mire Brutes this way and put people in really awkward positions where they really don't, like, damned if you do, damned if you don't sort of situations. And you can just walk up and say, deal with it. And they probably can. Now, all that being said, that is the reasonable version of this list. That is not the optimized to win games version of this list. The optimized version of Trophy Finga looks a little different. Oh, this is what it looks on the table, by the way. Oh, doubled it. So, trial bosses are good. 3 of them's very good. What about 7? What about 7 of these fuckers, dude? Like, 1,400 points for all these. All of them are getting the crit mortals. I mean, the crit exploding hits on their trogs. You can fit 7 of these while also still fitting a kill boss on Gnash Tooth, 3 units of Monster Killas, and some Slittas. So you can really, like, do some insane stuff. And you are playing an auxiliary list. Your opponent gets an extra CP, but the amount of combat potential this army has for very cheap is kind of outrageous. You can just walk around. 4 of your guys can be bubble wrapped. A bunch of them can get buffed. You can just send them in like squads. You can send 3 onto one objective and be like, "Come at me," and they probably can't. And you're just blocking up the table just enough with your infantry units that it's kind of hard to get to them first. And if they hit you first, you're getting knocked off. Every time you charge in, you have that chance of giving you strikes last. And it's not a bad chance. It's quite likely, actually. You can really bully people with this list. Now, I know most people don't own anything like this, but it'd be a pretty funny thing to borrow some from your friends, etc. Get some 3D prints, and maybe don't play 7, maybe play 5, 6, even after that. But, like, if you really push the limits on this, you can do crazy stuff, and I think this list could probably go, this stupid list first draft could probably go like 4-1 in a GT if you knew what you're doing with it. It's really hard to deal with. It's a lot of damage. It's just raw math. So I think this is an interesting thing that people are not doing and not really exploring, even though it's been good for a while now. And sometimes you have to push the limits. And people were complaining about Monster Killas being too spammy, but they bought Monster Killas anyway. And they ended up having like 7 units of Monster Killas and then did okay. You know what I mean? Like, if this is at least is like exciting, and you don't even need 7 of them. Like, this is just an extreme example of like how you should maybe be thinking about like, how do I optimize this? You could easily also play like 3 or 4 Great Gnash Tooths. They're very good in this sub-faction. They're very flexible. They're quite efficient mathematically, and you can hide them in terrain pieces. Like, I would like them to maybe drop like 10 points to really be a little more optimal, but they're actually not that far off. I own 5 because I'm a monster, but also because they were like $10 on eBay. Like, you could for $50 you could play 5 Gnash Tubes in this subfaction and just run rampant and piss people off. But it's a simple one, all right? So that's Trophy Finga, and I would probably play this. This is what that list looks like, by the way, on the table. Absolute menace. Disrespectful. Lastly, we got the boltboyz list. This is one that people have been clamoring for a while now, and I think that boltboyz are better than people give them credit for. I think people are trying to win with them in the wrong way. For a long time, boltboyz has kind of defined Kruleboyz, and that has not been really the case in 4th edition. A lot of that has to do with them no longer having crit mortals on the shooting. It's crit auto wound. And in this GHB, cover is really strong. So it's kind of hard to shoot what you want to shoot with. So you can't just play boltboyz. But people want it, right? Like, it's fun. And most of us own at least, like, 12. Some of us, like me, I own 27. Because I'm an army specialist and I only have a couple armies. But I'm a bit crazy with that. But I have 27, and most lists don't run more than 6. This is the core problem with boltboyz. I gotta keep shooting you, but I die to anything. Like, they're very, very, very squishy. And anything that touches them kills them. It's just how it is, right? So people try and solve that by playing far killables with middle finger, add 3 to the range, but 3 is like meaningless. Like and everyone who's tried it is like, you've played, you're like, this ain't it, chief. Like I just don't care about these 3 inches. That's what she said. What you really should be doing with it instead is playing light finger. So light finger lets you teleport 2 units on your turn. And the reason why you want to be playing this with boltboyz is because their range is already quite long. Like, you usually can shoot what you need to. You need to not get caught, and you need to be in position to shoot the units you need to shoot. And you have to be playing patiently. It used to be that boltboyz was a very explosive list that lived or died very quickly. That is not the case anymore. What you should be trying to do with boltboyz lists is whittle people down over time, and you want to try to make it so as many of your boltboyz as possible shoot for as many turns as possible into whatever is there. You don't really need to be assassinating targets. You just need to keep them shooting. So that's going to be the big goal and big theme here. Oh, that's interesting. This is also how you enable it. So Soggy Scumdrag really, really helps with Light Finger because he helps you be much more consistent and have access to your dirty tricks after you've done your double Light Finger ability. Now you're kind of unlikely, and he can help you really get some of your dirty tricks off later in that turn. Otherwise, you're at a pretty big disadvantage because you're not going to have access to your rules, right? So first thing, Hobgrots are key to this strategy. People are not playing enough Hobgrots. People have not been playing enough Hobgrots this entire edition. I keep saying it. You need to run cheap screens. If you're going to play a shooting arm, you can't just play threats. You have to play chaff. That way it gives your threats room to work. If you don't have chaff, you're going to lose. So Hobgrots. Not just 2 units of Hobgrots, though. 5 units of Hobgrots in this list. And you all own 5 units of Hobgrots, or can get them for very cheap, so don't give me any shit about that. I have played in a real GT and went 4-1 with 5 units of Hobgrots and a bunch of boltboyz. It works, and you need to do this. If you don't do this, you will lose. So, like, listen to me here. Play 5 units of Hobgrots, okay? The reason for that is that they're 80 points apiece. They're your cheapest unit. They have some shooting damage, and it may not seem like much, but when you combine it with a bunch of other aspects of shooting and you pile them all together, it adds up. It does make a difference. And they have that scrapping ability we talked about earlier, where they can basically, if you don't lose every single model in the unit, they can do Immortal and leave if they want to, which really helps them with scoring. And then people have to choose who they're dealing with, and you're teleporting around with double teleports, so it becomes a situation where it becomes very hard to catch you properly and to stop you from doing what you're doing. Secondly, we are playing an ROR, the Nurgle one, and that is Nurgle's Gift, the one with the 2 units of 3 Nurglings. So the reason for this is, if you're playing 5 units of Hobgrots, and people come into your Hobgrots, and they kill 2 or 3 units of Hobgrots, and then they double you lose. They run right past you, your screens after they kill them all, and get into your boltboyz, get into your threats, and then you sort of fall apart at that point. Nurgle's Gift, once a unit dies, you roll dice on a 5-up, and then it gets +1 each time the unit dies. You can put down 3 Nurglings, and they can be placed in combat. This is after unit dies, so the unit already swung into them, which can tie them in combat. So every time they kill a Hograt unit, there's an increasing chance that you put Nurglings in combat with them, they're still stuck there. So your screen basically doubles. And it happens, and so it protects you from getting doubled and losing the game on the spot. And that is very important with these boltboyz lists. Plus, they're pretty tanky, and it helps you score a little bit. They're not great at scoring, but they're there. And they're another unit they have to deal with, right? So, that's all the screening. If you look at like that's a lot of screening units. You have 7 units here. And I think one of the things that I want to really emphasize is that when you play a strategy that's not just like middle of the road, you have to really lean into it. You have to understand what your army does and what it's trying to do and push that to the limit. As you've seen with, like, for example, Celophase has been in the chat. She's been running with hammers, and hammers don't really work as 6. They kind of work as 12. When she started running 18, she started succeeding with it because she really leaned all the way into this strategy and then played all the pieces they needed to make it work. This is the same sort of thing, where you're trying to make the strategy work and you have to pay the cost to make it work. And a lot of the reason people don't succeed is because they're not willing to pay the tax and not willing to go hard enough on it. So, this is the list. It doesn't have as much shooting probably as some of you are going to expect. But remember, the point is not to shoot them all off in one turn. The point is to shoot every turn the entire game for 5 rounds straight. So, you got 5 units of Hobgrass split between numerous things and the Nurglings, as we already talked about. There's 2 reinforced units of boltboyz, and there is 2 Kruleboyz. So, combined, that's quite a bit of shooting, especially against monsters. Like, those Kruleboyz will take a monster out. But they're still really good against everything. Like, and they have long range, and they're pretty cheap. I wish they were 10 points cheaper, but they're pretty cheap, and 10 points wouldn't change anything here. So, altogether, that is a lot of shooting. That is 680 points worth of shooting, and a bunch of stuff to enable it, right? There's some extra damage bonuses that are present here. So the Snatcher boss can put his poison on them, and it's extra D3 points of damage. You can put on boltboyz, split it between several different units, do D3, 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 be kind of annoying with that, put some debuffs on people. Additionally, you do have the Snatcher boss and Scumdrek who can run up and basically... they're really, really excellent at picking off damaged units. They're not the kind of threats that will just pick up anything, but they will pick off a damaged unit. And when you're sitting here shooting and shooting and shooting, you can't be leaving stragglers around because they'll come up and tag your boltboyz. So the Snatcher boss and Scumdrek are there to basically run out and clean up the messes that have been left behind. Kill units that killed your Hobgrats and are now stuck there. You get a round of shooting into them. Then you come in and clean them up with the Snatcher boss or with Scumdrek, and it should work most of the time. With all the combinations of various points of damage, you're just keeping the space open. Slowly, as your screens die, their threats are dying, and they're keeping it from like one model stopping you from shooting. Right? You're also playing Morbid Conjuration. That's a little bit of a detail here, and it may seem kind of silly because there's just 2 Swamp Call the Shamans, but with Swamp Staff, one of them's 2 casts or +1 to cast. You can get so +1 to cast. You're pretty likely to get a Purple Sun. Now it's not crazy likely, but if you're throwing it out there, put Purple Sun on somebody, you're starting to do pretty substantial damage. But also like things like the chains. If you put them like behind someone's unit with a cast, and do D3 damage to a bunch of things, so it's damage right off the bat. You're also reducing their movement, making it harder for them to catch your shooting. So it kind of adds up. You're throwing out just like it just really nicely synergizes. And the other really big one is the bomb. There's this the maelstrom. Basically, you can throw it out there. You cast it early in the game, and then you run it up the table, and you shoot a bunch of stuff, and you put Snatcher boss poison on things. And you're like, killed him, filled up the maelstrom. It explodes. There's a bunch of mortals everywhere around it. Then the Snatcher boss venom goes off. There's more mortals around everything, and you're clearing up a disproportionate number of models. The thing is, you have to be really patient with that. You have to basically bide your time, cast the maelstrom, get on there, and then the next turn is when you want to have more of a fight going, and you run up the table. You want to be casting and countercasting until you have that thing on the table, as people are coming at you, and you're using your Hobgrass Slithers, etc., who are dying, to fill it up, basically. So you can send it up and then put guys in the way. Your Hobgrass, they die. Like, okay, cool. Now you're in range of my Maelstrom explodes. Take D6 mortals to each unit within 12 of it. I think maybe it's 9, and they really like combines their shooting in a very nice way to pick up a disproportionate amount of models. So this list, I think, really has a lot going on with it that people kind of got into the habit of playing. Like, screens sort of faded out in 4th edition, unfortunately, because they were too expensive at first. Like, Hografts were like 100 points, and now they're 80. And really, they probably should be 70. But they're fine at 80. This is what the list looks like on the table, and I think this is, again, a helpful thing to, like, see and kind of visualize. Look at how many units you have to just get in the way. Their only real job is to get in the way. They just hang out, they block lanes, they score points, and you just try and lose as few units per turn as possible, but you don't even want them to live. You just totally let them die. Like, throw them right in front, hopefully outside of easy countercharge range. And if someone comes to fight them, they're right in range of shooting, and you're like, okay, well, like, how do people can hide from my shooting with obscuring? Not if you're on the objectives with a bunch of Hobgrots. Then they have to go deal with that. Otherwise, you're gonna keep scoring. So you're gonna keep going ahead in points, and in order for them to take those objectives back from you, they have to come in, charge, and kill those Hobgrots. It puts them outside of the obscuring terrain. And that is where it gets really rough for them, because you don't care at all if the Hobgrots die. Like, at all. At that point, they're exposed. You're shooting them. Snatcher bosses coming in, cleaning stuff up. Like, it's really, really bad for them. Additionally, they're like, okay, I'm gonna come in, steal this objective, and then I put myself so I can redeploy. And if I get like at least like a 3-inch redeploy or something, I can be back in obscuring and I'm safe. Not if the Nurglings tagged you. Can't do anything at that point with it. Like, it's really, really tricky at that point. But you have to be playing a slow and patient gameplay style, and really be like, I'm just gonna shoot whatever is available to shoot every turn and score until like the late game when you maybe be more aggressive. But like, rather than going, I want to kill that thing, you're like, I'm just gonna kill what I can, and I'm going to score 10 to 20 points every single turn, and I'm going to be teleporting around the table constantly, and eventually, you're going to have to do something, and I have too many units in the way. And I'm going to counter shoot, and then come to my turn and shoot, charge up and clean up all those units. So this, I think, is a very competitive list. It is designed purely from a competitive standpoint. I would play this at a GT. So anybody who's looking for a good boltboyz list, this is a good list. It is going to be hard to play, and it's going to challenge people's instincts. They're going to want to like go all in and start like hammering stuff. And if you do that, you're probably going to lose. You have to play slowly and patiently, and sneaky. But this list is really good. So try this out and get some reps on it. That is the end of my lists, my stream here. I'm going to be posting this up on my YouTube channel, Arangelian. Same name as my stream. And I'm generally available to talk to, etc. And I'm posting all over the place. So, hit it up, give me a follow, give me a like. It really makes me feel good. I don't get anything from it. Like, it's not like I'm making money. It's just kind of fun to do. And it makes me feel like, okay, people are liking what I'm putting out. If they're not liking it, then I shouldn't do these particular videos, etc. Again, I want to shout out Moss Dog. He's awesome. There's a bunch of other people, like Tronbon is another person who's great to talk to. Yeah, so check them out and try these lists out. And if you play them, let me know how it went, because it's got me excited enough that I started painting some Kruleboyz again. Previously, I was just like, I don't want to play this generic list anymore. So, yeah. Absolutely, dude. Thank you, man. And yeah, I'm gonna go and clock out this stream, and as soon as it's done saving and uploading, I'll put all those links out there. All right, everybody. See ya.